Hello, David Clarke here from DaVinci Training, and in these couple of videos I'm going to talk about cleaning up old videos, and I'm going to explain how I went from a video that looks like this to a video that looks like this. So I'm doing a project which we filmed many years ago and was filmed on Hi8, then archived onto DV tape, and we haven't finished off since. Since we filmed it, lots of things have changed. So everything's widescreen these days, not 4:3, and of course we've moved even up to 4K footage. So I can't go back and refilm this stuff again. I want to clean it up and use it and put it up onto YouTube. Got two major problems. First of all, the footage itself is 4:3, so it's square, and everybody watches stuff on widescreen displays these days. And secondly, it's interlaced. And we all tend to watch stuff on computer screens and YouTube and that kind of thing where everything is progressive. So you've got to change it from interlaced to progressive. Interlaced is where you take an image and then you split it up into two halves, and every other line is updated every 50th of a second. So for example, take a look at this clip here. Again, this is a 4:3 Hi8 clip. And I use this one in particular because it's got all these diagonal lines in it, and they really show off some of the problems that you can get when you de-interlace stuff. Some programs de-interlace better than others. To be honest, EDIUS doesn't do a very good job on de-interlacing at all. So what I've got here is a Hi8 clip which has been zoomed in using the layouter up to HD, and it's on a 25p timeline. So it's got to do something from going from its original interlace thing, where effectively you got 50 pictures a second, to get it down to 25 pictures a second. And what EDIUS does is it basically chucks one of the fields completely. So I've completely lost half the horizontal resolution, which is why all these jaggies look really horrible. But that's problem number one. Problem number one is, how do you get rid of all those jaggies and merge those two fields into one? I've tried deinterlacing in pretty much all the editing programs that I can use, Premiere, Resolve, etc. The one that does the best job is probably Resolve. If you buy the studio version, it's got this AI deinterlacing, which isn't bad, but I can still do it better using a completely different program. And it's also a completely different free program. So that's the one I use. So though I'm in EDIUS here, the way I'm going to deinterlace this stuff, you could do basically with any program. The second problem I've got is, like this clip here, it's very noisy. I mean, we filmed that scene. It's supposed to be dark and dingy because that's what's happening in the plot at this time. But Hi8 wasn't very good at doing dark scenes, so it's made an awful lot of noise. As you can see here, it's terrible. And I want to get rid of that. So I've got two things. I've got to deinterlace it and I've got to clean it up and denoise it. There's also occasionally other things like this. You see that glitch that we just had there? A dropout, typically caused by analog tape. And I know I've got to fix that as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stick a marker on that so I know to come back to it. I've assigned a keyboard shortcut to sticking markers on clips in EDIUS X. Have a look at my EDIUS 10.3 video if you want to know how to do that. And I know a little bit later on here there's also another stupid little glitch. Lasts a frame there. I want to get rid of that too. Now I'm going to show you a couple of different ways of doing this. One is entirely in the editing program, and I'm going to use a program called Staxrip for deinterlacing, and another plugin for EDIUS, which you can get for all the major editing programs, but a plugin for EDIUS called Neat Video, which is one of the best plugins for removing noise. And the second way I'm going to show you is to do the denoising and the upscaling in a completely different program called Topaz. Topaz is an AI upscaler. I'll put those in two different videos. And I'll put links in the description so you can jump straight to them. Now my workflow for this is I'll do an edit, and then once I've worked out which bits of the clips that I want to use in the edit, I'll then trim it down to just those sections, maybe with a couple of handles on either side so I've got a bit of wiggle room if I need to. Then I'll export those, then I'll deinterlace them, then I'll denoise them, then I'll bring in those new clips, bung them onto the timeline, put them in the right places, then I'll do all the grading and everything else afterwards. So yes, the way I do it is actually quite laborious, but it's the way I get the best results. I don't like to do the whole edit, do the grading, then make a final movie, and then denoise it and deinterlace it. I like to do it to the original clips and then do more stuff to them afterwards because I get the best results. I'll explain how I trim it down to just the bits on the timeline at the end of the video. What I want to do now is get straight into deinterlacing and then denoising. And first, I'm going to look at doing this with Neat Video for the denoising. My second video will look at using topaz for the upscaling and denoising. And then the final video will look at doing the same kind of thing, but in Resolve, and a couple of the extra things that Resolve has got for cleaning up video as well, which is quite nice. So first off, I am going to look at deinterlacing. And if you look at that shot, you can see all these horrible jaggies here, all caused by the fact that EDIUS has chucked away half the fields, and it does look pretty terrible. Now, just as a comparison, this is the same shot done in Premiere. This is the same shot done in the free version of Resolve, and then this is the same shot which is done in the paid version, the studio version of Resolve with their neural deinterlacing. But I get a much better result using something else. I'm using a free program called Staxrip, and it uses a deinterlacing folder called QTMC, which is widely recognized to be the best one there is available. And if you did a search for that on the internet, you used to come up with, you need to use this command line prompt, and you need to shove this in here and this in there, and it was a real pain in the neck to use. And then I found this program, Staxrip, which lets me use it nice and easily. The program itself does a lot of stuff, but mainly I just use it for deinterlacing. So just type Staxrip into Google, and you can either download it from here or from Video Help. Once it's downloaded, just unzip it, and then as soon as you run it, it'll ask you a simple question of where do you want to keep the preferences. I generally choose right next to the program, and then you get into the program itself. Now, there's a lot of things that you can do with this program, and I don't use most of it. I just use the deinterlacing. I haven't actually got to learn all the other bits and pieces, so I'll just be showing you how I do the deinterlacing in here. What I normally do is I set up a project template so I can use it again and again. So you can do that if you haven't loaded up any clips. So what I'll do is I'll show you the settings first, and then I'll load up a clip and process it. Up here is where you choose the clips you're going to load. This is where the clips are actually going to be made to. This is the main stuff. What filters are you adding? The source has to be ticked all the time because that's just how it reads the stuff. And the only thing I'm going to fiddle with is fields, which is this deinterlacing stuff. There is noise reduction in here. Now, I haven't used that. I tend to use Neat Video because I can tweak it for each individual shot inside the editing program. So I don't use the noise reduction here, and I don't use the resizing, although you can do lots and lots of different types of resizing here. You can just right click on it and choose any of these settings, and there's all these types of resizing. I don't use that either because, again, I resize it in my editing program because I generally use EDIUS, which has got very, very nice resizing in it, so I'm quite happy with resizing it afterwards. Literally, I'm deinterlacing it first. So what I'll do is I'll tick field, right-click on where it says medium, go to field, and go through all this lot and choose QTGMC, that one there. Now, as soon as you click on it, it says what preset do you want to use. I tend to go for medium. The longer it processes, the better job it's supposed to do. It's not the fastest thing in the world anyway, and I found medium does a good job for me. As soon as you've done that, it says, oh, what kind of input have you got? Well, I'm inputting interlaced video, and that's it. It's now set this up. As a default, what this will do is take a 25 frames a second interlaced clip and change it into a 50p clip. Now, you might want to do that because 25 frames a second progressive clip looks slightly different to 50 frames progressive. If you've got 50 frames, you get a slightly smoother movement. 25 frames a second is a bit more film-like. Now, for what I'm doing, which was a drama, we wanted that kind of film-like look, so I wanted to use 25p. So to make 25p, I've got to do one more thing, which is I've got to double-click on this thing, and here it actually opens up different parameters for all these things. So you see, this preset has put in lots and lots of different things. I actually don't know what most of them mean. I want to add something onto it, so I'm just going to click the cursor just after the 8, put in a comma, and then a space, and then FPS div isor equals 2, which basically means chop number of frames in half. So it's making a 50p thing and then putting it down to 25. And I change it to that because I like the 25p look. If you want the 50p look, you don't have to change that. The next thing I want to do is make sure it gets the aspect ratio right. So I'm putting in DV footage, which is 4:3. So I want to make sure the final stuff comes out as 4:3 square pixels, which are nice and easy to use. The way to sort that out is click on the word par, which is the, as it says, target pixel aspect ratio, and then choose this one, which is PAL 4:3. And that one is quite important, otherwise it comes out a little bit squashed and you've got to change the aspect ratio in your editing program. Then over here, we've got what kind of files it's going to make. So at the moment it's making an X265 file in an MKV wrapper. which is not great for loading up into an editing program. First of all, a lot of programs don't like MKV, so I want to change that to something else. And what I'm going to do is click on it, and then out of all the options, I'm going to go to FFmpeg and choose MOV. Now I'm choosing MOV because of the kind of compression that I'm going to use, and that's what you set here. If I click on that, I've got lots and lots of different options, but the one I want to go for is ProRes. So it makes sort of Apple style clips. I don't want to use H.264, H.265 or anything like that, because they're all quite heavily compressed, and I'm really taking this and then using it for editing. If I was going to be taking this and just giving it something to watch, then maybe I would use H.264 and an MP4 file, but no, I want to make ProRes files. I could make uncompressed files, they'll just be very, very big. I find ProRes doesn't lose very much quality and is manageable. So I choose ProRes, and because it's ProRes, you want it to be a MOV. You know, you could actually set other things in here, so I could set it to be an AVI ProRes file, which nothing will understand. But I choose that because it's a very common setup. You can go further and just double click on this and change the kind of ProRes it's doing and stuff like that. But no, that's good enough for me. I've literally just set those two up. Don't bother to do anything with here because I just want to take the sound as it was and just reuse it. You'll notice it's also got a resizing setting in here, but this doesn't kick in unless you tick that. So that's irrelevant. It's just doing that. It's doing the par and it's making a MOV file. And I want to save that as a preset. So I go up to File, Save as Project Template and call it. And I generally tick this one as well because that means that when you next start Staxrip, it'll use this preset, which just saves time later on. Now I've set up a preset, I can use that again and again in the future. I didn't have to, I could have loaded a file and then changed it all, but then I'd have had to change it all next time and so on. Now I want to load a file, so I'm going to right click on here and say Open. Got all these options, and generally what I do is I have a whole bunch of files sitting in a folder waiting to be encoded, so I go Batch and then do that. But here I'm just going to do a single file. I'm going to choose that, and I'm going to find the DV version of that clip we were looking at in EDIUS. There's a little bit of jiggery pokery, and then you just say Add Job, Start, and then it does its business. And like I said, it isn't the fastest program in the world, so it will take a little bit of time, although this is quite a small clip. Let's go back to EDIUS. It automatically made it in the same folder as the original. So I'm just going to take that, drag it in, put it onto the timeline. EDIUS automatically sticks the back bars on it. So I'm just going to open up the layouter and then just zoom it so it fits. Now the way that i8 always worked is it left a bit of rubbish around the edge. So if I just made the whole thing fit, I'm still going to have these black bars down the side. And you notice I've got a thinner black bar there than there. So what I've got to do is zoom it and then move it across a bit until it fits the screen. And there we are. I've now got a nicely deinterlaced clip that's being resized in EDIUS. Inside of EDIUS, it's using this format of resampling, which is my favorite, Lanczos. There's variations here which you can try out. I've set the default to be Lanczos on my project because I think everything comes out a bit sharper. In EDIUS, you can always change it for individual clips in the layouter just by choosing something else and seeing what it looks like. That's now being resized nicely. It's already being deinterlaced, and you can see the difference between the two clips. That's my clip that's being deinterlaced straight away by EDIUS, and that's the one that's being deinterlaced with QTMCs. Particularly, I notice it on these diagonals. Look at it, it's just so much nicer. There's just an awful lot of more detail in there. Obviously, it's still a bit fuzzy and it's not like a high definition clip, but it's just the deinterlacing works so much better in that than it does here. And it works better than pretty much anything else that I've tried. Now, after deinterlacing it, the next thing I want to do is look at denoising it. And I'm going to look at the denoising on this clip because this is spectacularly noisy. Here I've got a clip that I've already put through Staxrip. What you notice there is that the noise is considerably different between the two. Again, I need to scale it. Obviously, I could go into the layouter to do that, but what I also do, since I do this a lot, is when I've made up a layouter like this, which resizes stuff, I'll just right-click it and say, Save as Current Preset. So I can then just take that and drag it onto any clip that I need to rescale. So this is the EDIUS one, very noisy. This is the Staxrip one. The noise has gone down a bit just by dint of deinterlacing it. But it's still there and I still want to get rid of it. And this is where I use Neat Video. Now, Neat Video is a plugin that plugs into every editing program. I have got it here for EDIUS because I use EDIUS a lot, but you can use it in Premiere, After Effects, Resolve, everything. Resolve actually has its own noise reduction, but Neat Video is definitely better. Now, normally to use an effect in EDIUS, you take it, drop it onto the clip, and then you just open it up and do stuff with it. Neat Video always has to be the very first clip in any list of clips. If I put it first, it's going to take the standard definition one, the unscaled one, denoise it, and then it's going to upscale it. I've actually found that I think I get better results by upscaling it first and then denoising it. So what I've got to do is a little extra before I can put the effect on it, and that's to put this in a sequence. So that makes it upscale it, and then you apply the effect to the sequence. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark out the clip just by pressing the Z key. And then what I want to do is to put it in its own sequence. I've got a keyboard shortcut set for that, which is Shift and A. So here you see just Shift and A has put it into a sequence up here and left all the clips below it. But you can't see them because this is blotting it out. I've only got that keyboard shortcut because I set it up. I mean, I've mentioned it in a few videos, so you probably know about it. But if you go to the user settings and then interface keyboard shortcut, and then you type in sequence or a bit of sequence, it shows you all the possible things that you could do with sequences. And you want to put a keyboard shortcut onto this one. Convert in and out to sequence. Because that'll do this. You mark it in and out, and then it'll take everything on the timeline and put it in its own sequence. If you don't assign that keyboard shortcut, you cannot do this because there's no option anywhere else in the program. If you go into that sequence, you can see it's actually got the two video clips that were there in the first place. It never puts the audio in, it always does the video, but that's all I really need in this case. But now I've done that, this is effectively seen as an upscaled HD clip, and I can stick Neat Video on it and then denoise it. So let me open up Neat Video. Now there's lots and lots of different things that you can do with Neat Video, and there's lots of videos on the internet about it, so I won't go through it here. What I do in my case is I will click this button, Auto Profile, and it just sort of looks at it and grabs a thing of the noise. I'll go to Tools, make sure I'm in Advanced mode, and then I go to Adjust and Preview. The noise I've got is temporal noise. It's noise which changes over time, so that's the kind of noise I'm getting through. Neat Video does temporal or spatial noise, so obviously that's noise just from one location to another. And what I'm trying to do is get rid of temporal noise, not spatial noise. So generally I fiddle with stuff in here. I'll tend to put it on high quality, which obviously is a bit slower. I might have to fiddle with the radius, especially with this kind of noise, which is, there's a lot of it basically. And there's a nice little thing here to help you sort of tune what the noise is like. I then also tend to go for dust and scratches and adapt to changing noise and just tick those two. Now, if you want to see what it looks like, you can say play and it'll just do a little bit of a preview and you'll get an idea of what it's going to look like. And it's still quite noisy, especially around my arms there, so that's probably not good enough. So then I'll try upping the radius a bit and do another quick preview. And I know in this case I've got to actually change this temporal noise level. This little noise check thing, if you click on that, it gives you a picture and it's kind of saying what bits are being done and what bits aren't being done. And if you up it, you'll notice more of the image is being done, and particularly I want to do more of the arm there. Now the trouble with doing noise reduction is it tends to also lose a bit of detail in the picture. Neat Video is very good at trying to keep it, but it is still a problem. It's still something that it does. Now with this particular noisy stuff, I tend to put it right up there, and then I get a nice clean image. Still not perfect, but it's nice and clean. Now it has got more blurred. So I'll then go on to the spatial settings, and I'm going to turn off all the spatial noise reduction, because I don't need that at all. But I will turn on the edge smoothing and the sharpening, because the sharpening will try and bring a bit of detail back into it. As a default, you've only got sharpening on the high tones, but if you put it up on the mids a bit, and you put it up on the lows in particular bring back a lot of detail, but they also do tend to make it look a bit kind of posterizey. I mean, the essential thing is just fiddle with these buttons and find something you like and then play all and see what it looks like. And maybe I'll whack that all the way up to there. And then once I've got something I'm happy with, click on apply, and now you've got the noise reduction there on the clip. Now I could try just quickly playing this in a loop and see if it works, and that's the noise reduction one. But you notice as soon as you got to that, it's slowing down, and that's because it's quite hard to do all this stuff, and it really can't play that back in real time, especially since I've turned everything up to high quality. Inside of Neat Video, you can go to the Preferences and Performance, click Optimize Settings, and it'll try and use your graphics card as well as your processor. In EDIUS, it doesn't use the graphics card very much, but Neat Video is something that can use the graphics card. So you get a decent enough graphics card, you might be able to play this stuff back in real time. This system has got a 1660 NVIDIA, which isn't a bad graphics card, it's a couple of years old, but I know it will not play this stuff back in real time. So that's why the next thing I will do is to mark out the clip, and then I'll use render and add to timeline. I always remember Shift Q as the keyboard shortcut. Nice thing about EDIUS is it does it in the background, so I can let it get on with it and then go to the next clip and grab hold of that, put it onto the timeline, do my sequence. So that's Z for marking in an out point, A for making a sequence. And since it's exactly the same scene, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag that and drop it on there. Oh, I did forget to scale it, so let's go into that sequence, choose that thing, find my high 8 thing, and just make sure it fits, and then I can pop back into this. And now that I've got that set, with the same noise reduction settings, I could just Shift Q that. The nice thing is, of course, EDIUS going off in the background and rendering that for me, so I can get on and do all the other clips. Made it a lot quicker than when I used to do this in EDIUS 9. But I do find with Neat Video, it's great, but it won't play back in real time. I can live with that. I want the good results. And here I am. It's now rendered, and it plays nicely. And here you can see now a quick comparison between the original DV stuff upscaled and the stuff that's been done by Strax and Neat Video on this side. Now there's a couple of other things to mention about this. First of all, there's this glitch. How would I get rid of that? What I'm going to do is I'm going to step into this sequence, which is the one which has got the noisy deinterlaced one. And I'm going to go to that frame there where there's a problem, and I'm going to step back one frame to where there isn't a problem. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to take a still picture of that, which I can either use the button on the timeline or I can just go Control T. And that puts a still up on the timeline. Then I'm going to take that and drop it over the frame where there's a glitch, which is this one here, where there's a marker. Now, I only want one frame's worth, so I'm just going to chop off the end and delete it. And now what I've got is I have covered up that glitch just by repeating a frame. Now you might see it as you're playing it back. There's not a lot moving here. There's kind of a slight hesitation about there. If there was a lot moving, that probably would have messed up too much stuff. And what I generally do with these kind of things is instead of just covering up the entire frame, I'll actually only cover up the glitch. So to do that, go to the effects, grab hold of the mask filter, open it up, and now I'm going to draw a box over roughly where I think that glitch is. Now at the moment, I'm still seeing the whole of the image. So what I want to do is make everything outside that box transparent. So I'm going to go up to the opacity of the outside and make it transparent. So if I turn off the one underneath, you can see I've just made a stripe. And that stripe then goes over the top of all the other video. What I'd probably also do is to go into that mask and just put on a bit of softness, probably on the inside, and soften it down a bit. Obviously, if you can pop this up onto a big screen and see it nicely, you'll be able to judge what it's doing. But yeah, I can't really see the join there. And now, that bit gets repeated, but everything else is the same. So that's sorted out that one. Now, a little bit later on, just down here, where I put a marker earlier on, there is also this glitch. And I'm going to do the same thing with that. So what I'm going to do again is to go back one frame, take a picture, put the picture over the top, chop off the end. Let's zoom in so I can see this nicely. Make sure that's over the top of this. And again, I just want the same kind of thing. I just want to mask out the bit where there's a problem. So the simplest thing to that is probably go back to the other one, grab the mask folder from that and dump it on there. And then go in and adjust that mask. So obviously it's up here, but it's only showing up around my trousers. Okay, so I'm scaling that there. Scaling it proportionally, which is kind of annoying because I actually want to make it thinner. So I'm just going to turn off the proportional scaling. And there we are. I can just move that around till it goes over the bit that I need to cover up. And then there, I have also sorted out that glitch. In fact, if I look at it on the big screen here, I think I've missed it slightly. I can still see a bit. So let's go into there, let's move them down a bit. There we are. Now that I've fixed those two, I'm going to go back to the original sequence, and then I'm going to re-render it with the noise reduction. So I'll fix those glitches, then put the noise reduction on top, and then render it. Having got a nice, good original, then I'll start doing my color correction and grading and anything else, or if I want to add any effects to it, even if I want to take it off to another program. I've now got a good original to work from. And with this one, I might put on a YUV curve. Let's just open up the scopes and have a quick look. Yeah, you can see it's all really, really dark. So let's try and brighten that up a bit by just grabbing hold of that and moving it up. Let's grab the black so they go down to the ground. It's possibly too much brightened up. I still want it to look dingy. Colour's gone a bit, so I'm going to then throw on a 3-way colour corrector, and let's just miss the mid-tones. Try and get some colour back in it. Or whatever, use the primary colour corrector, whatever you fancy. But that's the sort of thing that I would go ahead and do. I do my grading and anything else afterwards. So the other question is, okay, if you have got an edit, what's the best way of trimming it down to just using the bits that are on the timeline? Obviously this is very EDIUS specific. So here I've got the edit, which is with my original DV footage. And whilst I was doing the edit and then talking about it with other people, I did put a temporary effect on just to make sure it fits. What I want to do is to take that and just trim it down to the clips that are used on the timeline. This footage is actually a very, very large clip. If I double click on it and put it up here, you notice this is an hour-long clip. So I don't want to have to do the whole hour for what is effectively 30 seconds worth of footage. I really just want to do the bits on the timeline. I might even make them with a couple of extra seconds on either side, a few handles, as they say, just so I can fiddle around with it a bit more later on. But what can I do about that? Well, EDIUS has got this thing called Consolidate Project. But to be honest, I don't think it works tremendously well. So I don't use that. I'm going to export it using what's called an AAF. Now what I want to do is I want to export it as original kind of DV footage. The same stuff that I actually had on the timeline. This is DV. The high 8 was copied onto DV for archiving. And I want to keep it DV without really changing it. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to change the project to a DV project. Now I happen to have made up a project setting for that. Assuming you haven't, I'm just going to take my existing current setting and I'm going to change it to 725/76, which is PAL. Lower field, which is DV. No alpha channel, 8-bit. And finally, change the color space. Change the aspect ratio to 4:3. And all that should be 4:3 DV. Final thing would be to pop up here and to choose DV AVI as the render format. So everything here has been changed to DV. Now that I do that, of course, the clips themselves have got stuff on them, and I want clips that are exactly the same as the original, so I don't want stuff on them. So I'm going to go to the layouter on this, just go to the preset here and say original size. And that changes it back to be the original size. You notice the brown line that indicated there was a filter on there has disappeared. And then I'm just going to leave that one selected. And then I'm going to select those two and just drag the layouter from this one onto those so they don't have anything either. So now I've got footage with no effects on it whatsoever sitting on the timeline. Next thing I want to do is to make an AAF. Now you've got two ways of making an AAF. This one has been in it for ages. You go up to Export Project and AAF. Or you go to Print to File and there's an AAF down here under the others. I'm going to use that one. So I'm going to select it, go Export, decide where it's going to go. So I'll give it a name. And then I've got to set some settings up. So that's down here under Types and Detail. Now the types are just different presets with different things. And you can see I've actually made a couple of my own. What I'm going to do is go into the detail and actually change the settings. Now looking at this, first of all at the top here, if you choose Legacy, it'll only do the one track, the first track on there. So I don't do that. Separate audio and video, yeah, you can separate the sound or you can leave them together. If you don't separate the sound out, it'll actually make up twice as many clips as you actually need, but at least the sound's actually included with it. Then you have this option. What are you going to do? Are you going to copy the clips? Are you going to copy and compress, or are you going to use the original? So if I did that, it would literally link to the original files, the hour-long file, and would be no use for what I'm doing right now. If I wanted to take this whole edit to another project, it might be useful, but it's not useful for what I'm doing right now. This thing takes the entire timeline and makes it as a movie. So that's pretty useless for this as well. I want to use the copy clips option. And when I'm copying clips, I want to say, use the area that I've actually used, not the whole thing. And then I can put a margin on it. If this is 0, then it just uses exactly the amount of footage which is on the timeline. If you want to have a bit of spare footage to play with, just in case you want to tweak it later on, you can put on any margin you like. I like to have a spare 2 seconds on either side. Then, the most important question is, what are you going to make it into? Now, I want to make it into Microsoft DV. That's kind of standard DV footage, which is what it is in the first place. But, if you look at this, you've got lots and lots and lots of different options here. And there's things like DV AVI or DV PAL or DV Stream. But any of those, they're making the Grass Valley variety of DV. And there's nothing wrong with that. Actually, the program I'm going to would understand that. But I find that for a lot of programs, some of them don't understand the Grass Valley one. So I like to make up a Microsoft DV preset. So actually, I've got to come out of this, then go back to print to file, then go to DV, have this selected, and then make a preset by pressing the save button, which I am going to call MSDV. And the other thing I'm going to make sure is ticked, which is as a default, is this: use MSDV codec, which means it uses the Microsoft codec. Now that I've made that, I can go back to my AAF, go back to the detail here, make sure I'm on copy clips, put a margin in of 2 seconds, and here I can look for MSDV. Now I'm going to save a preset, just because it means next time around I don't have to type it all in. And now you can see that's in these list of options here. You see I had a couple here that I'd made earlier. That's the one that I've just made up. So next time I could just go straight to that. And now if I click save, EDIUS will pop it up in the job monitor and go off and make these 3 clips up on the hard drive. Now here you are. It's made up those clips. It's actually made up 6 of them. The other option in the AAF that I had, if I ticked separate audio and video, it would have made me 3 video clips without sound and 3 audio clips. Because I ticked don't separate audio and video, it's made 3 clips for video and 3 clips for audio, but since they're not separated, it actually basically made the same thing twice. So I don't need half of these. So I'm just going to dump them. But the nice thing is, it's got sound. And I'd like to have the sound with it. So if you don't like that, if you don't like the fact it doubles up on everything, then just do that. And then you can save out the sound as like a WAV file and the video as a video file. Having done that, I can now go off to Stax. Now, because I ticked the load template on startup, whenever I load it up, it's already got my settings in there. And I don't have to worry about any settings. I can just go right click on source, open, file batch, add folder, find the folder, select it, it loads up the clips, go OK, and it's now got my 3 clips all ready to go. You know, sometimes I'll have a folder with 20, 30 clips. They're all sitting there ready to go. You click start, it goes, it gets on with it. And they're not very big clips, so it shouldn't take that long, but again, it isn't that fast. You'll notice as Stax is working, it actually makes up a little temporary folder for every single clip. So what it does is takes the clip, splits it into audio and video, does stuff to it, and then combines it again and makes up my final MOV file. And it doesn't clean up after itself. There might be an option in there to do that, but I haven't found it. So once it's done its encoding, I always have to go back and remember to delete those temporary files. So there, it's finished. There's the temporary files. Like I said, there's a whole bunch of stuff in there I don't really need, so I'm going to just select those and delete them, just to tidy stuff up. I'm then going to take those clips and drag them into EDIUS. I made up a little folder just so I know where they are. And I could just take them and drop them over the top of these clips, but I like to keep the originals there and put the new ones on a track above it. You can either add in another video and audio track or separate them out. So there we are. I stuck another video track in. Now what I'm going to do is take the first clip, which is that one. It starts 2 seconds in because I put on 2 seconds handle. So I'm going to go +200 and then mark an in point. Go to the timeline, press Z to mark the clip. The video and the audio are patched in to go there. So all I've got to do is press that button and my new deinterlace clip goes in there. Same here, Z, clip number 2, +200, in, press the button to overwrite it on the timeline, Z, last clip, +200, in, overwrite. And now I've got those 3 deinterlace clips on top. Of course, they're not the right size, so what I want to do is then take the layout from there, there, and there, and there we are. I've got my deinterlace clips ready for my denoising. And I don't just use that method of making AAFs for doing this kind of thing. I use it if I want to take a bunch of clips off into anything. And the format that I use will generally depend on what the clips are on the timeline and where they're going. For this, I want to keep them exactly the same as the originals. So that is how I would upscale and deinterlace and denoise stuff using Staxrip, EDIUS and Neat Video. Hope you found that useful. In the next video, I'll look at doing the same kind of thing, but instead using a program you have to pay for called Video Enhance AI, which I think does the best job. So please join me for that. But in the meantime, please like and subscribe this video. If you want to know more about EDIUS, please visit my website www.dvctraining.co.uk, where you can find out more about EDIUS and details I do on systems and all sorts of things like that. Anyway, hope you found that useful, and I'll see you in the next video.